My and brothers, what we celebrate today is coming to an acceptance of who our God is and how our God made us and how we respond to his loving act of creation. In the book of Genesis, it is written, God created us male and female. He created us. In his image, he created us. And the image of God is the image of love. That's who we are at our core. In our essence, we are God's loving creatures made in his image and likeness. But if you look closely at the story at the very beginning of the Bible, in the book of Genesis, you look really closely, you'll notice that there is a second creation story. So in chapter 1, we have the creation that God describes what God did. And then in chapter 3, chapter 2 and leads into chapter 3, we have a second creation story. And the reason why we have a second one, because our Jewish foreparents who gave us what we call the Old Testament, they had to explain how a loving God who created us in his image and likeness, how it went wrong. How did a loving God create us and then we found ourselves and find ourselves like we truly are now? Not always loving, not always kind, not always compassionate. So it's no coincidence that the story of Adam and Eve is at the very beginning of the Bible, because it is a seminal story of humankind. It is our story. God created us out of his love, and we responded to his love by turning our backs on him. Now, for those of us who are older Catholics, and I know that when I say that, I have to keep in that age up, So for those of us who are in our 50s or older, who were raised in a Catholic church that had the Baltimore Catechism as our source of information, we were taught that Adam and Eve were the persons who made everything go wrong for us. We were taught to blame everything on Adam and Eve. If they had not sinned, there would be no sin. If they had not sinned, there would be no death. We were taught wrong. We were taught wrong. Think of that scene in the garden. Adam and Eve entered into the garden, and they found in the garden, aside from God, who else was in the garden? The snake, okay, serpent. And the serpent, really who? Satan, Thank you, sis. You guys are going to get away with this without talking? Oh, no, it's not. Come on now. Brunch at 12:30. Yeah, Rick, you change that one, okay? So, the serpent was in the garden, and the serpent, as my sister said, was really... So, those of us who were taught that sin came into the world because of Adam and Eve, sin was already in the world. The devil was already present. They didn't bring sin, they responded to sin. So what the Adam and Eve story says about you and me is this. The Adam and Eve story says that we as human beings, like Adam and Eve, we are born into a broken world over which we have no control. Each and every one of us were born into a broken world over which we have no control. And out of our brokenness, we sometimes turn to sin. Out of our hurt, out of our pain, out of our fear, out of our doubts, we sometimes turn to sin. That's what the Adam and Eve story says about you and me. But this is what the Adam and Eve story says about our God. After Adam and Eve sinned, after they turned their backs on God, as they were leaving the garden, we are told at the end of chapter 3, it is such a beautiful description of who our God is. We are told that God sewed garments for them so that they would not go into the world naked. That God sewed garments for them so that they would not go into the world naked. Even though Adam and Eve turned their backs on God, God could not turn his backs on them. He sewed garments for them because he loved them. He sewed garments for them because they were still his children, even though they rejected him as their father. That's the God who sent his son into the world to say to you and me, this is who I am, and this is how I really made you. That yes, you have your fears. Yes, you have your doubts. Yes, you sin. But the ultimate reality is you were made in my image. You were made in my image. At your core, you are made to love. When we are our true selves, when we're at our best, love is who we are. This is what we're celebrating today, who we truly are. And we need a day like today because we do forget. For all the reasons that I just gave you, we do forget. It's hard to live the way God created us to live. There are all kinds of reasons, and we all have our excuses. And some of those aren't excuses. It's really true for us. But the ultimate truth is this. We're loved by our God, and we're called to love. We as Catholic Christians, we celebrate this truth in community. We come together as a faith community, experiencing the love of God, hoping that that love will empower us to share his love with one another. That's how we do it as Catholic Christians. Traditions do it in other ways.